Okay, so the purpose of this video then is to ensure that by the end of the lesson, we are all going to be up to date and have read and annotated the conflict and power cluster from the anthology, and then obviously we can take our time going forward and preparing for your exams. So the poems we're going to be looking at in this video are Remains by Simon Armitage, Tissue by Imtiaz Darker, The Prelude Stealing the Boat by William Wordsworth, Storming on the Island by James Heaney, Charge of the Light Brigade from Alfred Tennyson, The Emigree by Carl Rumans, Bayonet Charge by Ted Hughes, and Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. So the first poem we're going to look at is Remains by Simon Armitage. So the theme of this poem consists of guilt and conflict. So the soldier comes back from fighting in an unknown country, possibly suffering from PTSD, and he's feeling guilty about what has happened out there. So the title itself can have multiple meanings because obviously you've got the physical remains of the soldier, the enemy combatant that he's killed. You've got the remaining memories in his head of what happened, and then again potentially if the character's got PTSD, then the remains of him. You know, he's not whole, he's not well, so he's got these remains of him. So there's a couple of meanings there, there's a couple of readings of the title itself. So the poem is formed of 8 stanzas, and the first 7 are unrhymed quatrains. Quatrain just means 4 lines, so we've got 8 stanzas that are 4 lines in length. They don't rhyme, and then the final stanza is made up of 2 lines, and it's also a monologue. Okay, so if we look at the poem itself, excuse me, it starts with there is a sense of repetition. So on another occasion, so this has happened before. That it's almost as if the poet is having a conversation with someone. So on another occasion, this has happened before. He's chatting. He's telling us. It's very informal. It's very conversational, and he's telling us about his exploits, his experiences of the war. So on another occasion, we get sent out to tackle looters raiding a bank, and one of them legs it. So there's that casual conversational tone. Up the road, probably armed, possibly not. Well, myself and somebody else and somebody else. It's quite vague. You think about this, he's on about killing someone, and he can't remember who he's with. So are we saying that he can't remember, or maybe he doesn't want to actually remember because of that guilt that we spoke about? So there's a couple of readings there. So we get also some enjambment here. So 3 of a kind, all letting fly, and I swear I see every round. So the line or the sentence doesn't end at the end of the line. It continues onto another line. And so it's casual. So I swear I see every round. So it just carries on. Now this is something that crops up quite a bit in this poem, this enjambment. So I see every round as it rips through his life. So it's horrific imagery there. So it's ripping through his life. Again, we get this idea that he can't articulate, he can't remember, he doesn't want to remember. So we've hit this looter a dozen times. He's there on the ground, sort of inside out. So he can't even describe what this person that he's killed looks like. He's sort of inside out. Again, does he not want to remember because of that potential guilt? So more graphic imagery, pain itself, the image of agony. One of my mates goes by and tosses his guts back into his body, and he's carted off in the back of a lorry. So we get the very casual tone. One of my mates tosses his guts, carted off. It's a very casual tone, but then it's juxtaposed with that horrific imagery. I mean, think about that, carted off in the back of a lorry, tosses his guts back into his body. So this guy's guts are all over the floor, and his mates just come along and thrown them back in. So it's very casual. But then we get that full stop, end of a lorry. That full stop obviously gives an air of finality to this man's life. We get some short sentences for that tension. So end of the story, except not really. So we're moving on now, so that the physical remains have gone in the back of that lorry, but end of the story, except not really. The mental remains are still there. The guilt is still there. His blood shadow stays on the streets. It's still there. So he's going back to it, and he's walking past it, and he's seeing that blood on the floor. So we get the repetition that emphasizes the recurrence of the memories. He's probably on, possibly not. So it's emphasizing, it's repeating what's possibly happened. And then he's trying to forget at the end of this stanza, and the drinking drugs won't flush him out. So he's trying to forget this man. He's trying to forget what he's done, but it just won't go. He can't get rid of him. You still can't forget him. He can't, that idea that he's not going. He's here when he closed my eyes. And then the dug in behind enemy lines. So he's not left this man. He's left the physical remains behind. In that war zone, but the actual memories, the guilt, the whatever that's come back with him now. So he's haunted. So that this memory has got into his head, and now it's behind enemy lines because it's in his head. And there's a sort of reversal because our narrator was obviously a soldier fighting in this distant land behind enemy lines. So we get this sort of idea that they've flipped. So the physical narrator fighting behind enemy lines, and the metaphorical or the memory of the dead soldier is now back in England, back in Britain, back wherever, behind enemy lines because he can't get rid of him. He can't escape him. And then the final line, he argues a slight metaphor there maybe. So there's a literal meaning. So maybe when he's killed him and he's moving the body, we get the bloody hands. And then we also get obviously the swearing of bloody, but also maybe a metaphor that he can't get rid of the blood. His bloody life in my bloody hands now, that's it. Can't get rid of it. It's almost like you can't wash the blood from your hands, maybe. So there's another reading of that line. Excuse me. So the next one we're going to look at is Tissue by Imtiaz Darka. So the main themes of this poem are the nature of power and the instability of life. So it contains 10 stanzas, 4 of which are 4-lined, and they do not rhyme. And then the final stanza is a single line in length, adding emphasis to what she's saying. So this is quite a tricky one, I think, but there's quite a few interpretations, but it is interesting. So the opening 3 stanzas highlight the importance of paper to humans. All over these first 3 stanzas is references to the importance of paper. So paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thin by age or touching, the kind you find in well-used books. So enjambment again, they're touching to the kind. The back of the Quran, where a hand has written the names and histories, who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. So we get this idea that we use tissue or you use paper to record the most important dates in our lives, the births, the deaths, the most important, those things we believe in, such as the Quran, and we use them. We regularly go back to it, so they're well worn, thin by age or touch, and well used. So that's suggesting that it means a lot to us. So, but it's fragile, yeah. So you could argue that this poem is an extended metaphor for the fragility of life. So if buildings were paper, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Now, if we're looking at comparisons, could we argue there's a comparison there to Ozymandias with the statue? And there's another slight reading of it, which is there, but I'm not saying this is a definitive reading. Is that could this link to 9/11? So if the poem was written in 2006 and it's taken from a terrorist at my table, could this just be a little link there to 9/11 with the buildings, with it going away, with it falling down? Or could you just simply be saying that no matter the strength of what we build, the importance of what we build, can it still just fall away whenever it feels? At any moment, we don't have that control that we think we have. So maps, okay. So these ideas of these things that matter to us. So maps obviously linked to the journeys that we take. So the sun shines through their borderlines, the marks, the rivers that make roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. So a bit of alliteration there with the R's. So again, we're recording all these things. Some more enjambment. Find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold. So that's what we're buying with our lives, what we're doing with our lives, what are the things that we pay for that matter to us. So then we get this idea of someone building something, like an architect building something. We're building it with paper. So if we go to the idea of the living tissue, well, that could be us. With living tissue, so that's humans. We've got living tissue. Raise a structure never meant to last. So that grand design, are we the grand design? I'm going back to architect, because the architect be God, maybe, if you wanted to go down that road. So the architect or God could use all this paper, all these fragile things to build up this life with living tissue, to raise that structure. It was never meant to last. And then at the end of it, we get that single line stanza to emphasize the fragility of human life. So it's fleeting, it's going. I think this is very, very similar in some ways to Ozymandias, that idea of things not lasting despite our best intentions. So the next one then is the Prelude to Stealing the Boat by William Wordsworth. So this is taken from a much longer poem, an epic poem, and this deals with man's inability to control or have power over nature. So the poem is written in iambic pentameter, but it doesn't rhyme, so it's written in what is known as blank verse. So the poem is autobiographical and explains a trip he took at night and its effects on Wordsworth. So Wordsworth was a romantic poet, and so nature is very important to that genre of poetry. So let's have a look at it then. So nature then. So one summer evening led by her. So the her is nature. I found a little boat tied to a willow tree. Within a rocky cave, its usual home. Straight, I unloosened her chain. So he's unloosened it, so it's free within nature now. So it's tied up. He unloosed it, so he gets it free from there. So we get some really positive and then just a hint of negative imagery as well. So pushed from the shore, it was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure. So he's sneaking, and something he's happy to do. He wants to do it as an idea of pleasure, but it's troubling. So there's some really positive imagery, but then there's an ever so slight negative tone as well. So again, like I said, we get that positive image of nature. Okay, so there's no stanzas. There's lots of punctuation, and a lot of use of and. So it's almost as though he's telling this story. So if we listen to people tell us stories, there's lots of use of and. So it's to help the poem's narrative flow for the reader or the speaker. So that's what the punctuations are there for, and the repetition of and. So she was an elfin pinnace. So elfin is it's like delicate, and pinnace is a small boat. So it's like personification of the boat. So she was a lovely, small, delicate boat that he was with. Lustily, I dipped my oars into the silent lake. So he's excited. Lustily, he's looking forward to what he's doing. So at some point, here we go then. So, and as I rose up on my stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. There's this nice, it's gliding through, so it's very positive again. Went from behind that craggy steep till then the horizons bound a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power, instinct, upreared its head. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape. So that positive imagery there, halfway through, is now moving to something more negative, potentially a little bit gothic. So that grim shape. So it's some personification. So we get the simile, a measured motion like a living thing. So that's the simile of something. This thing that he's seeing is like a living thing, but it's strode after me. Strode after me is obviously personification because it's walking after him. It's going after him. Okay. Again, we get the Gothic connotations of what he's saying. Their hunger, darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. So it's very dark now. So it's gone from this exciting trip into nature, but he can't control the nature. The nature is the thing with power, and it's turning itself against him. So he gets back now. He gets out of the boat, and by day he's starting to remember. He's having dreams about it, but the memory is dominated by that power, by nature. So he's not remembering pleasant images of trees or sea. It's that dark mountain that he can see in his mind. Excuse me. So Seamus Heaney's Storm on the Island then. So what's interesting about this, again, if we think about Remains, where there was that multiple reading of the title, there's no article at the start of this, so there's no a, an, or the. So we just get Storm on the Island. So we don't know what storm he's talking about, if it's a particular storm. And then there's potentially another reading as well, that this isn't just about a literal storm, that maybe the storm is a metaphor for maybe Northern Ireland and the Troubles, because Seamus Heaney was an Irish writer. Is an Irish writer, sorry. So Stormont is where the Northern Irish government is located. Storm on the Island, Stormont, and there's a few other hints There's a few other ideas that might link into that theory as we go through the poem. And again, it's written in blank verse, so the iambic pentameter, but not the rhyme. So it starts with a confident tone. We are prepared. We build our houses squat, so they're low. So squat means it's low. It's built to last. So he's ready for this storm that's coming. So it's written in present tense. So he's telling us what's happening. He's not alone because we get the use of we and us. So we know this person has someone with him. And then shriveled up is the wizened earth has never troubled us. So that shriveled up earth has never troubled them with hay. And then we get some more enjambment, which is which might prove company when it blows full blast. So the enjambment there obviously adds emphasis to blast. And again, we get a conversational tone again, where he's telling us this thing. So it's very chatty, very non-standard English, but it's quite chatty. But then think about what's happening here. This is a storm. So the enjambment as mentioned, and then the pathetic fallacy at the end there can raise a tragic chorus in a gale. So the sound of the wind and the leaves gives us that sound of a chorus, a tragic chorus. So it's loud and it's unhappy, it's sad as the wind is hurling around. So we get some military images now. So let's try and find them. Exploding, strafes, bombarded, salvo. So these are ideas of like weaponry and war and fighting. So, not necessarily, this isn't necessarily the reading of the poem, but if we go back to the idea of the Troubles, and then these are all these military and war-esque terminology. So it's almost as if the house is under attack. So, it could be Stormont, it could be the country of Northern Ireland under attack by this storm of the IRA, if we were looking for that. So again, could this link the Troubles and to the Troubles and the literal attacks on Ireland by the IRA? And again, if we look to the very window spits like a tame cat turns savage. So that enjambment there, tame cat turns savage, is offering us that emphasis on turn savage. So we know that this is something dark and dangerous and scary that's happening. So we could argue that the storm is an unknown quantity that cannot be contained by man, no matter how prepared we are. So they're ready and they're waiting, but there's nothing they can do to stop it. So the Charge of the Light Brigade then by Alfred Tennyson. So this is set during the Crimean War between England and Russia, and an order was misunderstood, and 600 cavalry, that's the Light Brigade, soldiers charged into the Russian cannon fire, and 150 soldiers died. So the poem is ordered into 6 stanzas, so we would say maybe memorial stones or military regiments. So the first 3, so 1, 2, and 3, are about the charge, 4 and 5 are about the battle, and then the 6th and final stanza is about how should the dead be remembered. Okay, so we get lots of repetition through this, lots and lots of repetitions. So half a league, half a league, half a league onwards. Rode the 600, rode the 600, rode the 600. Okay, so there's lots of that. The Valley of Death, which is a biblical reference. We get the rhetorical question: was there a man dismayed? So these soldiers, they're going, they're charging, but is any of them worried? Is any of them scared? Doesn't matter. They're going, and they don't even realise. No, not though the soldiers knew someone had blundered, so they didn't know. So we get the highlight here of the lack of power that the soldiers have over their own lives. Theirs is not to make reply. Theirs is not to reason why. Theirs is but to do and die. So that's it. That's what they're there for. They're there to fight and they're there to die. And so we get the alliteration as well in there with the theirs and the repetition. Again, lots of repetition, some personification, into the jaws of death, the mouth of hell. So we're given these things, those human characteristics there. And the alliteration again. So there's lots and lots of repetition, lots and lots of, going over and over with something. And each line ending with rode the 600 until we get to the end of the 4th stanza, which is not the 600. So they've gone, they're all dying. So they rode back out, but not the 600. So it changes. Okay? Not the 600. We're going back into the cannons to the left and the right of them. So the journey is complete now. They're coming out, and they fought so well. So they survived the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell. So that personification, those metaphors are there again. They are repeated. And that last line again still ends with 600, but it's left of 600. So we're only getting those ones that are left now, not the full 600. And then the final stanza, which contrasts quite nicely with Exposure by Wilfred Owen, because Wordsworth doesn't question the deaths of these men or critique the commanders. He's celebrating the heroism and the valour of those soldiers. Honour the charge they made. Honour the Light Brigade, noble 600. So he's not saying, he's not focusing on the mistakes of the commanders. He's focusing on the bravery of those that died. Whereas, with Wilfred Owen, there's very much more sense of why are we in this war? Why are we in this fight? So the next one then is the Emigre by Carol Rumans. So Emigre is the female form of emigrant. Rumans suggests that the unnamed or potentially fictional city may be under the control of a dictatorial regime. So the poem's got the theme of exile. It has 3 stanzas of 8 lines. So 3 stanzas in which 2 have 8 lines, and then the final one is 9 long lines in length, and there's no rhyme scheme. And the story focuses on the narrator's journey from a child to adulthood. So we get lots of references to light and shade. The first one we notice here, sunlight, there's repetition of that at the ending. Lots of use of that. There's lots of metaphors in here. The bright filled paperweight is a metaphor. There's more as we go through it. So the language that she's remembering as a child is no longer allowed to be spoken in this city. So that child's vocabulary I carried here, like a hollow dull. So we've got the simile there, like a hollow dull, opens and spills of grammar. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. It may be now a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes like sunlight. So maybe the idea here being that the sunlight links to these innocence and childhood. So that memory of that language that she spoke. And we're also getting the use of the senses. So the white streets. We can see these streets as she's describing them. My original view. We're looking at it. So we get the links to her childhood. If we just go back to the end of the first tyrant again, the first stanza again, it may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants. So there's the city is sick. It's a sort of personification there of the city being ill, but she is branded by an impression of sunlight. So there's some personification there. I have no passport, there's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plane. So this could be a metaphor potentially about the city only existing in her imagination or on the pages of the poem. The poem is where the city exists. We get some more personification, because the city takes her dancing. My city takes me dancing through the city. She's combing its hair and it loves its shining eyes. Lots of personification in this one. So we get the repetition of sunlight on the final line. So that's the childhood. And then we get the adulthood, the shadow. My shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. So she's trying to remember it. She's trying to evoke these memories of sunlight. And as she does, the adulthood, the shadowness is falling away. The next poem is Bayonet Child by Ted Hughes. So it focuses on an unnamed soldier going over the top during the First World War. It may have been inspired by Hughes' own father, who survived the First World War. I believe he survived a battle at Gallipoli even. It was written in 3 stanzas, and again the poem is concerned with the power or the lack of power that soldiers have over their own lives. So it starts really fast. We've got that fast-faced adverb even, of suddenly. He was awake and running. So raw, so the different connotations are also, so there's mental, emotional pain, the emotional pain of something being raw, and the physical pain of something being sore and hurting. So the hot khaki, that's his uniform. His sweat heavy, stumbling across a field of clods towards a green hedge that dazzled with rifle fire. So the rifle fire is dazzling him, it's confusing him. Hearing bullets smacking the belly out of the air, he lugged a rifle numb as a smashed arm. So this weapon is completely useless. It's like a smashed arm. It's just something he's having to carry. So we've got a simile in there as well, sweating like molten iron from the centre of his chest. So at the start of the second stanza, in bewilderment, then he almost stopped. So there's a bit of contrast there. The first stanza is very fast paced, it's the physical action, and now it's slowing down. In what cold clockwork of the stars and nations was the hand? Was he the hand pointing that second? So he's a cog here. So this is idea maybe where that lack of control comes from, because he's just a cog in a machine. He's just going around in a circle of that bigger machine of the government, of these nations that are making these decisions, that are sending these men to die. He's just a cog in that wider machine. He's running in the dark and he doesn't know why. So, like a man has jumped in the dark and runs, listening between his footfalls for the reason. So he's awake and he's running. So he's just running. So if we go back to the first stanza, that the patriotic tear that had brimmed in his eye. So he joins the army out of patriotism. He wants to fight. He believes in king and country, queen and country, and he wants to go and fight for that. But now he's in that battle. That's all gone. That's all forgotten about. And he's just running towards the enemy and he doesn't know why. And then statuary in mid-stride is slowing down again. So it feels as though he has stopped now. He's mid-stride. He doesn't know what's going on. And then threw up a yellow hair that rolled like a flame and crawled in a threshing circle, its mouth wide open, silent, its eyes standing out. So we get this idea here of a hair that's caught up in this big machinery, this threshing circle, this farm machinery. And we could argue that that's a metaphor for the man himself, for the soldier himself. He's going back to the idea of the clock and the clockwork, that he's just something small caught up in a much bigger cycle and the machinery of war. He plunged past, but he keeps going, so he plunges past towards it. He's charging. So king, honour, human dignity, etc., they're dropped. They're gone. They're luxuries and they can't afford them anymore. They're done. He's done with them. He's not fighting for these noble reasons. He's just fighting out of that primal need to survive. And then the final line, his terror's touchy dynamite, is that fear, now his terror is starting to override all his other emotions and it may explode at any time, and just that's him done. So the next one then is Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. So this is a narrative poem that's told from the point of view of a kamikaze pilot. So kamikaze, in translated from Japanese, means sort of divine or holy wind, who is discussing her father's decision not to carry out his orders and the effect this has on the rest of his life. So this kamikaze pilot turns around, doesn't go and kill these people, he turns around. So the poem is written in seven 6-line stanzas and has no rhyme scheme. It only has three full stops, suggesting it should be told orally, so it's just a continuous sort of like stream of consciousness, although a bit more detailed than that. And then we get the conflict, which is sort of between the soldiers, these men are sent to die, and then their orders or society. So her father embarked at sunrise. So there's a literal one there of he's getting on his plane, and then, embarking on something is the start of a new journey. With a flask of water, a samurai sword, in the cockpit, a shaven head. So they shave their heads as part of the ritual of becoming a kamikaze pilot, full of powerful incantations and enough fuel for a one-way journey into history. So incantations then is, almost magical or something like that, or mystical. So there's that suggestion that maybe he's been brainwashed because it's his, incantations. He's got these ideas in his head that are going round, and there's that idea that maybe that he's been brainwashed by this ritual of becoming a kamikaze pilot and then journey into history. So he won't be forgotten even. He's made this sacrifice and it will never be forgotten because of it. But halfway there, she thought, recounting it later to her children, he must have looked far down at the little fishing boats strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea. So it's a slight change in tone here. It's a bit more reflective. Okay? She thought. So that's her speculations on why he's done what he's done. He never says it. We never get his voice. So we get the modal verb of must. So we know that this is her father. So she's sympathetic to him. So he must have a reason for this. He can't have just decided not to. He must have a reason. And beneath them, arcing in swaves like a huge flag waved first one way, then the other in a figure of eight. The dark shoals of fishes flashing silver as their bellies swiveled towards the sun. So we get the simile there of these fish moving around like the flag that's being waved. Then we get F and S repeated, which builds pace up. And then swiveled is that spinning round. So the kamikaze pilots would have spiraled down. It was like a death spiral. And they would have spiraled down to crash their plane. So that's a slight link there to that idea. And remembered how his brothers waiting on the shores built cairns of pearl grey pebbles to see who's withstood the longest the turbulent inrush of breakers, bringing their father's boat safe. So now she's thinking, well, he's looking down now at that ocean, he's looking down at that beach. Could that natural beauty that's taking him back to childhood be taking him away from his mission? So he's looking at the child, he's thinking of these things, and we don't get any punctuation here in this stanza. So it's almost like it's just a dream, almost. He's just focusing, he's losing focus on what he's supposed to be doing, and he's remembering it's taking him back. And then the turbulent inrush of breakers. So there's that turbulent, that danger. Again, with planes go through turbulence, bringing their father's boat safe. So obviously there's that contrast between safe and turbulent. Yes, grandfather's boat, safe to the shore, salt sodden, awash with cloud-marked mackerel, black crabs, feathery prawns, the loose silver of whitebait, and once a tuna, the dark prince, muscular and dangerous. So lots of alliteration here. Shore, salt sodden, safe, shore, salt sodden. So we get this list of fish. But again, he's thinking about childhood and this safer time. But there's also another idea maybe that, when fishing boats go out, they catch the fish in the net, and he's caught in a net here. He can't escape the horrors of war, can't escape from the fighting. And then the metaphor, the dark prince, muscular and dangerous. So we're getting maybe some foreshadowing there, the dark ending to the poem. And though he came back, so again, he's still not named. Though he came back, my mother never spoke again in his presence, nor did she meet his eye, and the neighbours too. They treated him as though he no longer existed. Only we children still chattered and laughed. So we still don't get a name of this person. So now is that because she's ashamed of what he did? So as a child, she still chattered and laughed and treated him properly, but the adults are shunning him. So the innocent children, like he once was, are still playing with him and offering him an escape from what's happening with the adults who are blanking him. So there's a contrast. Till gradually we too learned to be silent, to live as though he had never returned, that this was no longer the father we loved, and sometimes she said he must have wondered which had been the better way to die. So there's the contrast. Gradually we learn too. So the adults react in this way, but it's not a natural way to react against him. So it's learned behaviour. So the children are taught to dislike him, to not like him. And then we get that emphasis there with the full stop, one of the few times we see some punctuation, that this was no longer the father we loved. This man, they don't love him anymore. It's not the same man because he didn't do his mission. So that it's the emphasis there that he was once loved. And it's past tense, so they no longer love him. And then we get asked that question, which is worse? The death in that plane, killing those people, or the life with his children, potentially grandchildren, but with people shunning him and hating him? So what is worth, the death or the life? There's quite a dark ending to that there. So although the neighbours got sympathy for that pilot, we see that the final conflict is not between opposing soldiers, but between the pilot and his society and culture and that idea of honour. So that's the poems then, and that's just a brief overview. Now the point of this video isn't to explain the poems line by line for you, it's for you to have some hints, get some ideas of where you can go in your own annotation, and obviously I'll be around to help you if you've got any questions. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and let's get on with it.